My name's Mike DeSanto. I'm one of the two owners here. My partner and wife, Renee Reiner, is the other. She's not going to be with us tonight, but I will be here. We're here to welcome Archer Mayer and his 25th iteration of Joe Gunther. So, okay. And Archer and I go back at least 19 iterations to the book rack and children's pages in Winooski, where he may well have been the actual second author to read at the store after we purchased it from Sandy Gorowski back in those days. So Archer and I do go back. We have some shared history that way with books and publishing and book selling. So my store manager here is Todd Gross. And I am going to turn the actual management of the program over to him. We expect a few more people to filter down. We may be moving around to put a few more chairs out, so bear with us. We may try and slide them in. These look like they're open in here. So we'll try and get some people in. But before we do that, we're going to have Archer come up and do an actual cake cutting. I don't know if this is going to work. It says, Happy 25th, Joe. Because I keep getting confused who I'm dealing with.
Right. That's
All
Joe
right.
with a G, of course, but, don't blame the guy.
So do you want to take the microphone now and share that with Archer? Thank you, Todd.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. Really appreciate it. Thank you for coming for the 20th year or however long it's been.
25, actually, but who's counting, right?
Well, 20th with Phoenix Books are in all of its
I'll give
iterations.
You that. Yes.
So we're going to have Archer cut the cake, and then we'll hand that out to you all, so you'll be part of it. But before we do that, I wanted to make a toast. Happy 25th. 25 more? How old would that make Joe? Anyway, congratulations, Archer Mayer. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you would do the honors.
Yeah, I've seen one of these used at an autopsy, actually.
And without any further ado, I would like to introduce Archer Mayer from Brattleboro now. And 25th book, it's really amazing. So please welcome Archer.
I feel like I ought to read from a dictionary now because you guys are so hyped up and full of sugar, and it's time to do something really boring. But so far I haven't been accused of doing that. A little eccentric maybe, but boring not. I am, as you well know, the bottom of 6 kids, so we try never to be boring. We also try to do away with such objects. If anyone was expecting a reading, forget about it. So who has not heard me do this thing before? Oh, cool. Wow, good Lord. Jeez Louise, now I can ignite. Usually I take pity because I've had people come up to me and went, oh, I really love your author imitations, and, I've been to 8 of them, and I'm just going, there's therapy for that. You don't actually, you can break this cycle. But, my God, with a room full of virgins. Okay, so in a nutshell, all of you who are expecting a different speaker because you screwed up your calendar, you're stuck with me, but it won't be too painful because Mike says that I'm restricted to 3 hours, so we're good. I've been doing this for probably way longer than I thought I would. Actually, guarantee I'm doing it for way longer than I thought. The first Joe Gunther open season came out in 1988. Got stellar reviews in the New York Times Book Review. The agent looked at the editor, and they both looked at me, and they kind of went, "Oh, do it like 3 more times, and you too can own an island next to Johnny Depp's." Well, Johnny is safe. So 25 books later, I'm not even close to buying that big rock that's in the middle of my stream out back of my house. So we're safe. But the trade-off is I'm happier than Johnny. because I love what I do. So it's turned out rather well. The nice thing is that I set out this series of books as a series of books. I also set out this series of books as not just a kind of mishmash of shoot-'em-up stories, none of which would have any relation to another in the series. I wanted to write a social anthropology of we Vermonters inhabiting this state, walking, talking, and problem solving, and of course, because they are murder mysteries, making damn poor decisions periodically as a kind of continuum. And therefore, my subject matter, my research, all my information, my database, in effect, is here. And so when every other author comes up to me and says, oh, you know, you're not driving a Maserati, for God's sake. You're not making a lot of money doing this series of books. And writing is all about making money, right? So give up Joe Gunther and this foolish series of books and write young adult novels featuring dogs and an excess of chocolate and put a CD in the back. Oh, and make it an ebook, because books are for losers. And so I listened to all that and decided all the more, of course, that I was well placed to doing exactly what I'm doing. So the whole idea of my running out of gas and Joe Gunther and all that ain't going to happen, because I still just can't sort of sort out all the stories left to tell. And someone the other day called me up, and they were doing an article or something, and they asked, so do you ever run out of ideas? Or maybe it was the question, you know, what do you do for ideas? And I guess my answer was I look up. Because the next book idea is right there, you know. It's because that's what I write about. I never actually was terribly crazy about murder mysteries. And people always ask me, well, okay, that's fine, but what do you read? I don't read murder mysteries. I am, among other things, a sort of slightly retiring now in my career cop. I used to do sex crimes against kids for years on end, so you can imagine I got tired of that. I'm currently, and still very actively, a death investigator for the medical examiner's office, and I write these bloody things. Do you think I want to curl up with a murder mystery at the end of the day? I mean, come on. I want to read something boring like The Causes of World War I or something like that. At least 1,500 pages. So those are the kind of things I read. Also, in a way, and I'm not being coy here, but I'd argue that in a funny kind of way, I don't write murder mysteries. Yes, they're bad guys and dead guys, but your local newspaper has that. I write social anthropologies and stories about decision-making, stories about people under stress. And as you can imagine in the two guises that I just mentioned, the two other hats I wear, that's what I spend all my time visiting. So whether it's in the middle of the night or the middle of the weekend or the middle of the day or whenever it is, when my pager goes off, I go to visit you guys when you didn't want me to come visit for whatever reason, you know. And I get to see you at a completely disorganized, sometimes grief-filled, sometimes confusion-addled time of your life. And while I will never take an absolute situation, and I've done way over 500 of these cases, and bring them into a book, I'd be an idiot if I didn't take the essence of all that stuff. You know, what I see and smell and hear and absorb and just soaks into my skin from an excess of exposure. That's what I want to share with you guys, because I sense, call me an idiot if I'm wrong, but I sense that what I'm doing is co-storytelling with you. I am turning around experiences kind of common to all of us, or at least vaguely familiar to all of us, and feeding them back to you in a fictional setting in a kind of organized fashion with a beginning, a middle, and an end. But the world I'm describing is so proximate to yours that you can use your inborn intelligence, creativity, and imagination, and you can co-tell the story with me. I lay out the plot. I lay out the sort of basic rhythm of it. But who in this room has not had that happy experience where you're turning the pages of a book and you forget you're doing so? You forget that your laundry is growing mildew. You forget that your children have stopped complaining for lack of nutrition and have passed out on the kitchen floor, okay? Because you are lost in the fictional daydream. You've turned on a mental movie, and that's the story that in a funny kind of way you're telling to yourself. My point being that if someone were so rude as to walk in and say, oh, wow, you're reading a book. Well, of course, having just interrupted you doing so, and you say, who are you reading? Which is sort of the standard question. I would hope that if I've done my job well enough, you would pause, ponder, and have to look at the cover and go, oh, it's this guy. Because in the best of all worlds, when we're lost in the fictional daydream, we're telling the story to ourselves. We're the author. So what is rule one of a writer? Never forget you're a reader first. And you are writing with readers, not to them. That's sort of why I do and how I do what I do. Gets a little more convoluted than that because my methodology follows that same route. I don't outline. I don't plot. I do a lot of research. I have said before to those who've heard me before, say that my motivators to write anything are ignorance and curiosity. I'm fascinated about lots and lots of stuff I know nothing about, and I want to share the end results of the resulting research with you guys. So I talk to a lot of people. I go to a lot of places. I read a lot of stuff. When I, at that magic time of year, looked up for the next book. And as a result of all that research and all those conversations, and I record everything. In the old days, in fact, I used to transcribe them and put them into 3-ring binders. Now, of course, with computers, I just put them on that. But the end result of all that is about 5 times more information than I could possibly use in a book. That allows me to think about chapter 1. That's the one thing I really concentrate on. And once I formulated chapter 1, I just go. And I tell the story kind of the way you read it, 1 page at a time. But in order to sort of figure out what I'm doing, I do 2 things. One is I call on that research to let the characters kind of follow their nose, but because I've done too much research, I can actually sort of let them go down these corridors I hadn't anticipated. That energizes me like crazy as a writer, and I hope that energy then translates to you as readers. The other thing, of course, is I edit. At the end of the book, which finishes about this time of the year, so I've got 3-4 months left of the allotted time I give myself, I will spend 4 months or 3 months editing. I might edit each one of these 300-page books up to 20 times. Just cleaning and polishing and shaving and making sure that the eloquence is there, that the poetry is there, that the music of the language is there, and that I've said it once, I've said it well, and I've passed it along, and that I've left lots of creative room for you guys to imagine to the fullest extent possible the worlds I present to you. That's what I'm about. And with that, I'm done. But as the other people who didn't raise their hands know all too well, this is also where I sort of stop monopolizing the conversation and I turn it around, because the reason I do these things, other than, of course, to stimulate some interest in my occupation, is to ask you to ask me questions, because I like the conversational style of these get-togethers. I hate it when there are two things I hate, actually. One is the author shows up, opens up the book, and begins to read from chapter 1. Drives me crazy. Most authors can't read worth a damn anyhow. I like to being a show-off. Of course, I'd like to think I can read a little better than that, but you guys know how to read. Buy the book, read it yourself. So I'm here to serve a function, which is to answer your questions, and presuming that you have some. So I could, before we go to that, I could tell you a little bit more about proof positive, or as another bookstore owner just recently introduced, as proof plausitive. A redder face you have rarely seen. But proof positive, just in a nutshell, and to reinforce what I was saying earlier about my methodology, begins at the house of a hoarder. Is that me or you? No, that's you, okay. I got a pager on too, so I wasn't sure. Damn, usually I try to put it on vibrate. My daughter calls this the silver bell for tolls for thee, you know. Thank you. Had me nervous there. Have no idea what I was saying, of course. Oh yes, some proof positive, right, hoarders. Okay, so it starts in the environment. Well, of course, hoarders are interesting to all of us because we all, whether you live in a Spartan empty room, we all live on a hoarding continuum, right? Either because we live in a Spartan room because we're fighting the impulse of acquiring anything, or we've gone to the dark side where we literally can't get into our houses anymore. And that's it. And we're all aware of it. I see all these heads doing this, you know, and they're all, you know, that's your bedroom he's talking about, honey. And it's true, we've got this strange fascination with it. Well, there was, of course, an abhorrent reality TV show about hoarding that was on for a little while, and I watched that and I went, well, this is 101 of how not to deal with, you know, hoarders and the hoarding problem and whatnot. Typical of me, of course, I found myself in these environments in many times either as a cop or as a death investigator. And of course, you do the serious work that you're called upon to do, but then I linger being the kind of guy I am, and I begin to interview as many people as I can find who are related to this, and I try to find out what makes them tick and what's it like to live and what do you like and whatnot. And I discovered that hoarders, by and large, I mean the hardcore hoarders, charming people. They're just like us. They go to work, they go to have jobs, you know, regular folks. They just have a little screw loose when it comes to hanging on to stuff. And funnily enough, as I began to do the investigating into this, and I talked to the assorted PhDs that have spent half a lifetime investigating why this works and how it works and the various influences and all that stuff, all of it fascinating, I found that the reasons and sources and influences and causalities behind hoarding are quite complex and quite varied, including, and this served me in very good stead, a whoop upside the head. Hoarding, the impulse to hoard, can be caused traumatically. Now, for me, you gotta love something like that, you know? Smack someone on the noggin, and next thing you know, oh my God, he's a hoarder. So that was irresistible. So I made that happen in the book. And because I'm a man of a certain age with certain memories, of course, the Vietnam War had to sort of play a slight influence in all of that. And that would be a good place to get whooped upside the head, would it not? So you can see how my brain interconnects and little synaptal flashes from one side to the other. I am a chaos theoretician. What can I tell you? I look at all these disparate, seemingly unconnected parts, and I connect them. So after I did all this research, I began the book. In a hoarding environment, we have the hoarder, we have the bodies, because if you're going to have a hoard, you got to put a body in it. Otherwise, what's all that stuff good for, right? So I do that, and then I brought me down to Philadelphia, as I described. Why did I go to Philadelphia? Well, my daughter lives there. I mean, if this can't be used as a tax dodge, what's it good for, you know? But like-minded creatures, my daughter and I are like that. So I called her up and I said, whoa, have I got an idea for you? So she immediately called up all her buddies around Philadelphia. They hit the ground running. And by the time Margot and I, that's Margot, by the way, that's Mrs. M in the corner, heads up. My editor, my business manager, forget about it. Anyhow, I'm the talent, she's the brains, and the business. The list goes on. Anyhow, also from Philadelphia. So we had two families, my daughter, her family, went down there, got totally overeducated, overfed, and overdriven in some really disreputable parts of town. I never knew that my daughter was so widely traveled, but she sat in the back of the pickup truck with a camera and she turned right, turned left. No, don't slow down in this. No, keep going, you know, stuff like that. So we took lots of photographs I never referred to. And she drew lots of maps that I didn't follow. And the end result is the Philadelphia section, which I had them all proofread, because that's the other thing I'll do. After these books are done, I may take the book in whole or in part and send it out to various people whose opinion I respect, and they'll feed back and say, no, that's no way to extract a bullet from an open heart wound. You know, you're supposed to do this, that, and the other. Or, no, that road doesn't even exist in Philadelphia. Or, yes, the nickname for the Schuylkill Expressway is the Schuylkill. So try to work that in, which I actually didn't, ironically enough, given that they're murder mysteries. And on and on and on. I have several Burlington scenes because, of course, if you're a mad murderer, you need to come to Burlington. There are more Vermonters in Burlington area, I'm sorry, but mad murderers, you know, and psychopathic killers need targets. So up to Burlington they come. So that part's in the book as well. So a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I'm told the best conclusion in the series so far. And now you'll have to buy the book. Exactly right. And if you're really good, I will not have torn out that last page. So let's start with the questions. I want to find out why you guys come to see me. Sir.
I haven't read any of your books, and I want to know where to start. Should we begin at the beginning, or in the middle, or at the end?
Well, you may have discovered now what a grim and serious guy I am. My usual counter to that question is, well, I wrote them in order. But having said that, I am a writer, and writers are all pessimists, and they know that they're not going to get employed because the average income of a writer is $10,000 a year in this country. So, with that in mind, I wrote every single book as a freestanding independent novel. And I set out to do that because I figured all my books would be rapidly rendered out of print. As it turns out, because of the brains of the outfit, all my books are actually available in print because we reacquired the rights to the Archer Mayor Joe Gunther books as they went out of print so that I could keep in business. However, that being said, there is a character continuum, if that's not too many Ks, that you can follow. There are several characters like Joe and Willie and Sammy. You'll get used to them all when you become addicted to the series, of course. And you follow their evolution and their intertanglements. That's going to make more sense to you if you read the books in series, in which case number 1 is open season. There are bookmarks aplenty throughout the building here that annotate 1 through 25 in the series. However, if you, like I, are not necessarily a series guy and not given to addicting yourself to a certain writer, then feel free to buy any title that catches your eye. What I sadly not sadly, but I have to honestly recommend that you don't ask me, you ask them. Because I can say with absolute certainty, I've never read any one of my books. Writing them is completely different than reading them. So I don't know what it's like to approach my body of work from the outside. Half the time I'm remembering stuff I actually cut out. And so it's a little confusing to me. Oh, you'll love this scene. Oh, no, hold it, maybe you won't. So don't go to me for that. There's the question you need to ask yourself. If you find an author you really like, years and years and years ago, for example, I discovered Patrick O'Brian. It's kind of the Jane Austen for men. I remember he was advertised at the time. There was everything you ever wanted to know about swashbuckling in the British Navy and, killing French and that kind of thing. So I began that, and I actually did get hooked. And I was delighted to follow all 18 books that Patrick O'Brian wrote before he died. Great. Normally, I don't do that. So you'll have to query yourself. Maybe start with open season to see if you like the water, and if you do, well then go for a swim. Like I say, all the books are available, and Michael will get them for you. Yes, sir.
So, a few weeks ago, you spoke about Vermont as a character.
What are you, stalking me?
No, you were a conflict and you lost. But what is your thesis of Vermont as a character?
My thesis is that when we first crawled out from under the rocks umpteen years ago, I probably would argue that we identified ourselves by geography. Oh, you're one of the hill country people. Oh, you're one of the valley people. We, from the get-go, have connected ourselves to a geography. We identify ourselves as Vermonters because we live in Vermont, or New Englanders because that's the larger, nexus. Americans, et cetera, et cetera. And I would argue that if any of you met one another for the first time tonight and you did a little chit-chat off in the corner and shook hands, within the first few sentences, you'd ask each other, where are you from? Not everyone pulls out their passport, but, but it is part of the common currency right up front, along with the name, rank, and serial number. That, to me, meant something, and it influenced me, furthermore, because I was brought up metaphorically in the back of a car. I mean, my father traveled, and all 6 kids traveled along until we fell off in various directions. I left home at 14, and I kept running. I couldn't stay still. So what did that mean? That meant new languages, new cultures, new countries, new associations, new short-term friends, and constantly assimilating very quickly, trying to fit in, trying to be invisible, and most of all, observing and studying and watching how people interact with one another so that I could sort of fit in or not get damaged or whatever the circumstances were. Lay low, keep your eyes open, and learn. That was formative to me. Enough so that when I finally decided that I'd had enough of this kind of life, I came to Vermont, and I've been in the same house for 32 years. This from a guy who lived in 30 different places before that event took place. So from A to Izzard, boom, just like that. It means a lot to me to belong somewhere at last. Am I a native Vermonter? No. Have I made Vermont my entire identity and my place of comfort and my home in the truest meaning of the word? You bet. And thank you all, natives or otherwise. Nativity, after all, is just an accident. You had no role in it. You just happened to be born somewhere. I could be an Oldsmobiler the way I was brought up, Just dumb luck. They dropped me off at an ER, and that makes me whatever I am. But that plays to so many people's sense of belonging. That's what I wanted to bring into the series of books. I wanted to make Vermont as omnipresent and as important and as influential and as informative as Joe Gunther or Willie or whatnot. And these people fit in or they don't fit in. Joe is a native. Willie is not. And you can sort of put your brain there when either one of those guys walk on stage. Someone like Sammy, however, I don't really identify where she's from. So you don't know, is she a native or is she an outsider? You can make up your mind. There again, I let you guys fill in those blanks. That's what I meant by making Vermont a character. Yes, sir.
I want to ask about writing mystery and in terms of separating fact from fiction.
Yeah.
And then we'll give you several examples. If you read Joe Nesbo, you can go to Google Earth and you can follow the whole story. Just as, oh, there's the address, there's the house,
Okay.
there it is.
Yep.
And I was reading one of your books at a conference one time, and this woman says, "Oh, you know, I'm in that book." And I said, "How's that?" She said, "Oh, well, you use real characters." And he called me up and said, "Who do you want to be in my next book?" And you listed the characters. And she says, "Oh, yes, I want to be the 17-year-old slut." And you used her name. Okay, now.
Sad but true. Spiky hair and all.
That makes the book a lot of fun, and it made it a lot more interesting for me because I said, "Oh, I know some of these people." But another writer, or actually I'm thinking of two of them, wrote a murder mystery, so to speak, about an event that happened in my hometown. Mm-hmm. Not only did he change, the streets weren't right. The buildings were in the right place. Yeah. The town was in a totally different part of the state. Yeah. It totally ruined the book for me. Now, so I'm wondering, how do you make these stories real? And there was only one book of yours that I read that seemed to be close to an area that I was really familiar. And it seemed pretty good, you know, Route 5 was in there and some of the things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure how much of it was real.
If, for example, if I need a pink house on High Street at number 43, I'll put it there. Even though there is no pink house, number 43, on High Street in Brattleboro, okay? High Street's there, Brattleboro's there, maybe even number 43 is there, but it ain't a pink house. I do that, why? Well, because I need the pink house because of the context of a piece of dialogue, maybe. Or I was just having an inside joke with the residents of Brattleboro, or a friend of mine lives in number 43 in Brattleboro, and so I decided, in a bright yellow house or whatever, and I decided to have fun just as an inside joke. It doesn't, really matter all that much to me to make a slight change like that. That having been said, by and large, I, like you, have never understood why people will invent out of whole cloth stuff that's readily available and which automatically invites the readers into a real world. If I indeed am going to write about us and the trials and tribulations we undergo, only I'll throw out the paperwork and jazz up the excitement level a little bit, I nevertheless see no point in making up Smithville and Main Street and Maple Street when the real counterparts are there. So that there are tourists that drive through Brattleboro that get pulled over by the cops for erratic vehicular behavior because they have my book in their lap and they're going, and the cops are used to it at this point because I work with them all the time and they just go, oh, for God's sake, just pull over and read the book. People go by the dispatch all the time and say, oh, I know, they'll never heard this one before. Is Lieutenant Gunther available for, and the dispatcher just goes, oh, God, please, when will it ever end? When's this guy going to go out of print? Who was it who wrote the 87th Street Precinct books? I'm always... Ed McBain. So Ed McBain writes this whole series of books, and what was his... It was New Something, New York City was called.
Yeah, it had a different name. I've forgotten it.
Yeah, well, you and me both. He just, New York City, for God's sake, you can say New York City. It's not like they're going to sue you or something. And yet there was this delicacy, this coyness, which drove me crazy. Talk about taking a shower with a raincoat, So, no, I've always been in disagreement with that, as clearly are you. The thing with the names, That came out of the blue many uncountable years for me. I can't remember when this started, but at one point people would say, "Oh, I'm representing the three-legged bent ear puppy society, and we're running an auction. And would you give us a hardback and we'll raffle it off?" And I thought, what's that going to get you? $15 on a $25 book, and I'll have to buy the bloody thing to give it to you because I don't have any myself. So this seemed like a really bad idea. So, and I stole this. I didn't come up with it. I said, how about you auction off a character name, and I'll put the winning character into the next Joe Gunther book. Really bad idea. Uncountable books later, Margot and I are counting up the characters who have little asterisks by their name. These are real people. Some of whom are in this room. And we counted 18 separate auction winners in one book. Talk about the tail wagging the dog. I mean, at this point I'm looking at this bus, and then I thought, bus, right, I'll put them all in a bus. And then who died in that accident? Well, I happen to have a list, Oh, what the hell, So I try to describe all this. Sometimes I make them go through sex change operations. I mean, I'll do any number of things to get my way through all this list of names because I can't sort of save them for a future book because I'm going to get another busload. So it's gotten to be a craziness, and I think Margot sort of recommended, you might want to sort of calm down the auction offer and, get down to single digits at least. So we're trying to do that. But do I have fun doing that? Oh, you bet. And people come up to me all the time, I'm your worst character. And the sad part is, all these names, sometimes I have to look at them and go, I have no clue who you are. Because here's the proviso when I do this auction thing, I say there's a rule. And the rule is I get to do anything I want with that name, including the sex change operations. So, and early on, people were going, oh, no, it's okay, Aunt Gladys will really like it. And I said, yeah, well, you may think Aunt Gladys, and really, but what happens when I need to put a name on a dead crack hooker? There's Gladys. And I did have one guy, and he insisted, and I said, your mother's going to read this book. I turned him into a real rotter, too. And sure enough, book came out, and he came back and said, gosh, how you've treated me pretty badly. Hello? So that does confuse the matter. I not only write about a real estate and 99% real things and real procedures and real police departments and real everything else, but you're right, I throw in real names, which can totally screw up some of the books, because if all of a sudden you're reading a character that you're supposed to be able to conjure up, as I've mentioned, your imagination, and this happens to be your mother, it's a little hard to ask you to make that stretch, So for that I apologize, but there are only 18 readers that are going through that pain, so who cares? Yes, sir.
Yeah, actually, probably a question for Margot. Your first 12, I think your first 13 books, when you republished them yourself, came out with an absolutely outstanding set of bindings and covers and photography on the front, which is very appropriate for the book itself. They're fantastic, and the question is, are you intending to do that in future books when you take over the publishing, or are you going to take over the publishing?
Well, did everyone hear that question? No. Okay, so I have the books that Margot and I publish, AM Press. Get it? Okay. AM Press books, they're about 18 titles, right, Margot? 18. So there are 18 titles under that grouping, and we own the rights outright for most of those. There are a couple of little squiggles on the latter ones. And that's pertinent because as the publishers in their dinosaur evolution and plodding forward progression, as they began to embrace things like plumbing, electricity, and the advent of ebooks, which they did very slowly. In the meantime, they were doing things as usual, which was, of course, they publish a hardback, they publish a paperback, and then they put you out of print. And then they write the author and they say you're out of print. Well, I was reading the same professional journals they were, and I saw ebooks coming easily down the pike. And Margot had the brains of saying, well, not only are they coming down the pike, but those, we could make money off of those because there's virtually no overhead. We could publish them as books and retire some minor debts. So, but that came a little later. My first thing when the option first came available, I was as old-fashioned as a publisher, but I recognized that I could print them as trade paperbacks, sell a minor fraction of the books that they were selling with no profit, and I could sell them for profit because I have no overhead. So to me, it was a good business decision on exactly the same numbers that for them was a disaster. So I said, guys, you clearly don't even know who I am because you're putting all my books out of print, and these are brilliant pieces of literature. But nevertheless, will you give me the rights, lock, stock, and barrel? They did. So the first generation before Margot and her genius came up with the ebooks was my idea of trade paperbacks. So we went for this uniform look. I am trained as a photographer. That was one of my previous adventures. And initially, those early covers, I just asked someone else, a designer and whatnot, put together these initial books. And you can see this generational change because Margot's also a designer. So she would look at this original stuff and say, okay, we can change the color here and the typeface there, bring them out and more. And she turned to me and said, and by the way, as we replace the older black trade paperbacks, how about you take your own cover photos? And we can have my daughter, who's also a photographer, take the author photo and put it on the back, make it a whole Mayer thing, designed by Mayer, written by Mayer, photographed by Mayer, you know, author photo by Mayer. So it's a kind of a Mayer enterprise. And that's what happened. So long story short, last night, night before last, I'm on the road back, heading home after an author invitation, and I stopped by Bellows Falls because that's the title of one of the books. And we need to upgrade the hard trade paperback, and so I stopped off at a bridge. There's a canal that goes through Bellows Falls, and the clock tower in the background, and it just so happened the fog blew in and set up a tripod, took time exposure. And it's already a design jacket because of the wonderful world of computers. So you've touched on something near and dear to the heart. We're going to keep going with these trade paperbacks. We just did a huge deal again. Margot's hard work put them through Ingram, which is a national or international distributor, so Mike can get hold of them just like that. The business is up and running. This answer, which sounds a little long and boring and whatnot, reflects all of Margot's life and 50% of mine, which is the business of being a writer. Because I actually wasn't kidding about the average income, which includes Stephen King, $10,000 a year. So guess who's carrying the heavy baggage on that statistic, okay? The rest of us guys are chump change. It also means that about 95% of all writers in the United States don't make their living from writing. I do. So I'm in the same category as Steve, who doesn't return my phone calls, curiously. But at least we're in the same percentile, so that's good. But it's absurd. It's crazy. I mean, as a business, you should never, ever, ever entertain this notion. I mean, I have neophytes who just learned to shave, and they come up to me and they ask, oh golly gee, I want to be a writer, and I ask them two questions: Are you employed or are you rich? Because think ahead. I was neither, but I am foolish, so that helps. And I did immediately come to Vermont, which of course embraced me with 3 jobs and a similar poor expectation of incomes. So we are all like-minded creatures here in the room, for which I'm very grateful. Who else? Yes.
I just wanted to tell you about a neat piece of serendipity. Many of us in this row belong to a book club at Macaulay Square, which is not a place just for old folks, but you know, we have to go somewhere. And we have a book club there. And last month, I wasn't sure about what book we were going to do, and ended up deciding we would do an author instead of a single book. Cool. So I went out and got like 5 or 6 different Archer Mayer ones, including the first one, who went to a very good reader in our group, and the latest one, not tonight's book, but you know,
Yeah.
3 Can Keep a Secret.
Yep.
I'm trying to decide which 3 still, but and we're really having a good time. People are saying this was was a good idea. It was something different. We're going to try to look at what Joe Gunther was like in the early books. Yep. How is he changing? Does he ever keep a girlfriend?
And what's it like being an ex-girlfriend?
So when we saw that you were going to be here, it was wonderful.
Well, I'm
so,
delighted.
A good-sized bunch of us are here tonight, so.
Thank
Thank you for coming.
Thank you all. Yes.
Following along, how old is Joe, and how slowly is he progressing?
How old are you? I won't tell if you won't.
That was fair.
No, the idea, yes. Did I cause that question to be asked? Yes, I did. But that was back in the Johnny Depp days. I was only supposed to write 5 books, and who was going to care? I had Joe come onto the stage as a Korean War veteran. It shows how long ago we began this series of books. But another reader of mine said, how she dealt with this was she's in her mind, even though it doesn't work out mathematically any more than Joe's age does, what she did was she puts all the books into a sort of a 4-year period. Okay, so book 1 is year 1, and book 330 is year 4, and that's how she makes it work for her. Most people, and I'm one of those people, don't care how old Sherlock Holmes is, who trotted around in the 1800s, and yet, according to the last TV show I saw, knows how to work an eye thing. Okay, well, I guess, whatever. She's a clever man, so I guess, So in other words, I think we can defy that and walk away from it even. I won't refer to the Korean War anymore, okay? Which I stopped doing in Disposable Man because, how do I remember that? Because it was 1 book too late. That's when the questions came out. How old is this guy? Hang on, all the calculators were coming out. And so he was nearing retirement in book 1. But that's employment in Vermont in a nutshell, is it not? Huh? I ask you. Right. Who did you know 65 and retired? Forget about it. I think he and Sammy and all of them are in sort of a suspended age group, and they sort of are wherever you want them to be. And I'm yeah, good. Yeah, so am I. Good, excellent. There you go. Yes.
Go ahead. Okay, Willie Kunkel.
Really?
Okay, now how much did you base his character on a real person?
I see myself in the mirror every morning. It's not a stretch. I'm just trying to be really pleasant tonight. My daughter says, "Are they still asking if you're the real Joe Gunther?" Why would they ask such a thing? She doesn't know I'm on my best behavior when I'm in a group of people. No, I don't take real personalities and ever put them onto a character. For one thing, because I do write about a real place and real procedures and real streets and real departments and everything else, so I want a little creative room, so I invent the plots and I invent the people. Obviously, we all know bits and pieces of these people. We all know decent folks like Joe Gunther. We all know cranky guys like Willie Kunkel. Probably not to the extent that Joe is a good guy. I mean, Joe is almost a quasi-saint. I mean, he's such a decent, thoughtful, I mean, you want to kill him. He's, it's like, oh, please, will you do something wrong? I remember I wrote a book called Fruits of the Poisonous Tree, and the reviewer in the New York Times said, why didn't he grab a machine gun and kill somebody? Because he should be really pissed off, and of course he is, but that's not how Joe expresses himself. Now, Willie, on the other hand, I mean, if any one of us had to actually spend more than 5 minutes with a real Willie Kunkel, I mean, you'd be crawling the walls. But do we love reading this guy? Of course we do. Why? Because he gets to do everything we wish we could, especially in regards to our bosses. I mean, nothing holds this guy back. What's the worst that can happen? They're going to fire me? I mean, he's like, come on, do it. I dare you. And it's happened a couple of times. Chris, go ahead.
Well, I think what I look forward to most in your books are the places that may not be exactly the perfect address, but things like the scene on top of the symphony at the Flynn Theater.
Yes.
I've not been up there. I don't know if you can actually do that.
Oh, I do that.
There,
Oh, yeah.
You could. Or the sort of underbelly of Barrie, the underbelly of a lot of these towns that are, I mean, the more I drive around Vermont, the more in small town Vermont, there are so many less than savory aspects to many of the towns, including Stowe, including, the places that are on show. And I think the way that you always include something that at least those of us who know Vermont say, oh yes, we don't have to think very much about the back streets of Bellows Falls, but oh yes, they are there. Yeah. And the one where, and I have no idea about the titles, I lose track of your titles the moment I read the book.
I have a terrible time of remembering my books.
But the one that involved Chinese, no, I still wouldn't know.
Dark
Root.
The one that involved the Chinese restaurants.
Yep.
And I swear, it was that Chinese restaurant in St. John's. But I don't know what it was. But I always thought that it was a mafia front or something awful.
Yeah.
And now it's gone. Did you know that? It's actually gone.
Well, there's so many of them coming and going because they're,
That one was there 30, 40 years, and now it's gone. But I always thought that, and then there was one on Church Street at the same time. There was never anybody in it, ever.
Yeah.
So
It wasn't
and it was just like the time that the book came out, and it was perfect because we knew this, but we of course didn't know it, but we really knew it. So I think there's an almost unlimited number of these, as it were, back streets of Vermont.
Yep.
And some of them are rural. Many of them are rural. I remember at one point I worked for a vet for a year, and the insides of some of those barns were so appalling.
Yep.
The conditions of the animals, and they are a pretty red barn outside, and you really, really don't want to know what's inside.
Yeah.
And yet this is the way they always had farmed. They're still out there. So I like it, the fact that I never know what it is you're gonna tell me, but I already, whatever it is, there are so many possibilities out there.
Well, this goes to the character and the geography, and the other questions that preceded this is that it was always my intention when discussing Vermont not to describe this as a state of syrup happy leaf-loving cows. That part was covered. Thank you very much. That's what most people think about Vermont, if they think about Vermont at all. So what I wanted to introduce was what I viewed, and of course with my various jobs, I visit those very jury spots on a regular basis that you were alluding to. And I don't want to describe Vermont as an armpit. I want to describe Vermont as what it is. And which is, yes, it's a lovely place. And yes, I described the beautiful mountains and the leaves and all the rest and that, but to pretend that we don't have our troubles and our heroin and our dispossession and our animal abuse and our poverty and our domestic violence would be folly and would miss all of the depth and three-dimensionality that we humans have to offer one another, be it good, bad, or indifferent. So that was an ambition, and I'm glad you appreciate that. Yes, ma'am. Oh, what? One more question. Oh, gosh. So do we have a fight? Do we have a fight? No, your hand's in the air. Oh.
I was curious how the books fare beyond Vermont and beyond New England. Is there a good audience that
here's the funny thing.
Attached to Vermont?
I assumed, of course, that this was 63% of my readership. As it turns out, we actually, as much as you can crunch numbers in a very confusing industry, it turns out that about half, or maybe even slightly more than half of my readership is outside the Northeast. So it's not just Vermont or New England or the Northeast. These books are read nationally, and for that I'm very happy and grateful.
I'm not surprised. Every time I read like a short story in the New Yorker or a novel, somewhere in there, a character goes to Vermont.
And they're never seen again. Thank you all for a wonderful evening. I appreciate it.